We are back, Jack. I can say Jack because I don't think I've ever had a student named Jack. If I have a student named Jack, I apologize for forgetting you exist. Anyway, we are back, and we are here to discuss the other elected officials in the executive branch. That wasn't half bad. And the heck, let's not do any more intro. Let's just start with it. The first guy that we're going to talk about today is the kind of obvious next choice after the governor. And that is, of course, the lieutenant governor. Is my face in the way of his face? Sorry if my face is in the way of his face, but you can look him up. That is Mike Kehoe. And aside from just generally enjoying the name Mike Kehoe, because it sounds like someone discussing the thing into which they insert their key so they can open their door. You know, I put my key in Mike Kehoe. Then he is also the lieutenant governor. He has several duties as lieutenant governor. In fact, most of them we've already discussed. But just so that we are all aware, first off, he actually has to serve as the acting governor when the governor is out of state. Now, this one's kind of iffy in modern times. Used to be that literally if our governor went to, let's say, Washington, D.C. to be his, wear his liaison hat, like we talked about last time, then it wouldn't make sense for him to try and make executive decisions for important things that were happening day to day in Missouri because, you'd be pounding out a telegram or whatever. Nowadays, he's getting emails and cell phone calls and all the stuff that keeps him up to date so that he's still pretty much functioning as governor. But in the legal technical sense, when he is out of state, the acting governor is Mike Kehoe, the lieutenant governor. Now, obviously, that goes a step further. If something were to happen to the actual governor, then the lieutenant governor would take over his spot. Just quick reminder, if I'm going too quickly for you, I'm a video. Pause me and write it down. So let's say that, our acting governor had some kind of health problem and passed away or simply just was unable to perform the duties of the position, then the lieutenant governor would take over. Also, if they had to resign. We've talked about this briefly. We mentioned the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that we had a governor who resigned very recently. I'm not going to go into all of the details as to why, but due to misconduct, he resigned, and that is how our current governor got his job. So that's probably the most likely of these things to happen. But anyway, those are how you can become governor as lieutenant governor. So what if the governor is in the state and he doesn't die and he doesn't resign? Does the lieutenant governor just sit there twiddling their thumbs and being terrible at darts like me? No, they have some other jobs. And one of them that we have talked extensively about, meaning like we've covered it for weeks now, is the fact that he must serve as the president of the Senate. He's the presiding officer. That means that in the case of a tie in the Senate, so with our Missouri State Senate, he's not going to Washington, D.C. here. We're talking about our state Senate, all right? If he were to go and be, present for a vote, I don't know, on some tax thing, right? That broke down 17 for, 17 against, because we have a 34-person Senate. Then he would get to be the tie-breaking vote. That's pretty cool, right? He would literally get to say, all right, 17 of you say yes, pass this tax bill. 17 of you say no. I say we pass it. And because he says it passes, it passes. He gets to be the tiebreaker. And that's, like I said, we've talked in detail about the Senate role in the legislative branch unit that we've already done. The next one is very fun to say. And it's probably one of the more day-to-day things that he does, like one of the things that takes up more of his time, and that is that he functions as the ombudsman. Ombudsman. It's a fun word. You know, it's fitting that Mike Kehoe is the ombudsman. Both fun to say. But anyway, he is the person who's responsible. Let's say that you believe you have been wronged by the state government, right? You think that you were mistreated. It's not like lawsuit mistreated, but like you think that there's a way that this thing could happen better. Then it's his job to see if that's actually happening or not happening and to do something about it, right? So let's say that, something is going on and you think that your paperwork is taking too long because you applied for some kind of license, right? And it's taking too long. Somebody's not doing their job. You could actually go on his governor or his lieutenant governor website, and there's like a little complaint thing, and you can go on and talk to him. That gets your goat. Anyway, so he's the ombudsman. So for all of these things, what do you think should be required? So once again, if you need to, pause me. Think about it. I paused myself because I don't trust you to pause me. So anyway, if you look back at the governor, a lot of you guys wanted to add things like an education requirement, stuff like that. But here you go. In order to be a lieutenant governor, you have to be 30 years old, U.S. citizen for 15 years, and a Missouri resident for the past 4 years. So if you pay close attention there, you may notice that the requirements for the lieutenant governor are actually slightly higher, just 5 more years of U.S. citizenship, than the actual governor's requirements. Why is that? Not 100% sure. My guess is that people looked at the fact that he's going to be also serving in the Senate and he is going to be like the voice of the people. But Missouri just likes weird things and requirements. So the lieutenant governor, also like the governor, serves 4-year terms. But unlike the governor, he doesn't have a term limit, meaning as long as Mike Kehoe wants to keep running for lieutenant governor and the people of Missouri keep voting him in, Mike Kehoe will be the lieutenant governor. Period. This is something that was on the ballot just very recently, and this is going to be true of most of who we talk about today. In November, which is now, on the 3rd, we voted as a state to not term limit them. So we decided to refrain from placing a term limit on these folks. You can have your own opinion about that, but that's what we chose. Something that I usually get asked when we're in person doing class is, how much do these guys get paid? Well, according to the most recent disclosed data, the lieutenant governor gets paid about $86,484 a year. Not bad money. But also not like crazy huge, because he's potentially going to be running an entire state. But yeah, it's not bad pay. Next up, the Secretary of State. Now, our current Secretary of State, you guys should have looked up, of course, on that last assignment, is John or Jay Ashcroft. So Jay Ashcroft, this gentleman, hopefully whose face I'm not covering, that's right there, is someone who has served in this position for a while now. And in fact, I believe his father served in the position way back when. But aside from coming from a long line of Ashcroft serving as Secretary of State, he is responsible for, first off, being the official record keeper of Missouri. What that means is that all of the documentation that has to happen at the state level, he certifies. It doesn't actually mean that Jay Ashcroft is like chasing people around, like, right? It's not what we're talking about. He doesn't actually write everything down himself, but he is the one who makes sure it is documented, right? And all those records are then kept in the state archives, and he is in charge of those. That includes a record of all of the governor's actions. Once again, Jay Ashcroft does not hide in the bushes of the governor's mansion and document what happens with the governor. That's not his job. But all official state actions taken, right? Anything where the governor declares something. So all the stuff recently with coronavirus where the governor's like, I hereby issue, this is going to be our guidelines for this. He's the one who is collecting that, documenting that, and making sure that it's all kept so that in the future we can look at this, not just like for fun later, but let's say that in 3 months, somebody's like, hey, I don't think that this statute or this decree from the governor is being followed. Then he can go, here's exactly what he said. And yeah, it is or isn't being followed, right? He also, most importantly, especially this year, most importantly, is in charge of certifying all election results. So that means here, just like in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona and all these places that are under controversy, it is his responsibility to make sure that the election goes well. And by well, I mean legally, right? So all of these complaints that people have against various states, the real complaint when President Trump is saying that, something was not done correctly, the real complaint there is actually against the Secretary of State of that state, because they are the ones who are actually responsible for that part of the state's operation. In our case, there wasn't much controversy for the national or any of the statewide elections, as far as I know. And the only thing that I tend to think about with the Secretary of State is the fact that it's kind of amusing to me that if he were to lose, now he won again, but if he were to lose, he would have to certify that those election results are valid. So like after the election, Jay Ashcroft, if he had lost, would have had to be like, yes, I lost, stamp, sign, right? It would just kind of be sad. Like, it's not official that you've lost until you say it's official. Anyway, qualifications for this. What do you think? Dora the Explorer, right? What do you think? Uh-huh. Yes. Backpack. Anyway, hopefully you've had enough time to think about what qualifications you would have, because here's the real ones. 25 years old, U.S. citizen, and a Missouri resident for 1 year. Once again, does not have to be a natural-born citizen, and only has to have lived in Missouri for a year. Now, Ashcroft has lived here for a long, long time, but it's not a requirement. So 25 years old, pretty much all of us teaching staff folk, if we wanted to run for Secretary of State, we could. I would not. Next up, the Attorney General. So the Attorney General for the state of Missouri is a gentleman by the name of Eric Schmidt. And I believe this is Eric Schmidt's picture. According to the website for the state government, this is Eric Schmidt's picture. The Attorney General is, first and foremost, the chief legal officer for the state. So they are in charge of making sure that the legal matters of the state are followed correctly. That means that if the state goes to court for any reason at a state level, that they are the actual attorney for the state, right? So literally, he has to show up in the courtroom, or nowadays via Zoom or whatever. But he actually has to show up in the courtroom if the state is in court. So any of the Supreme Court cases we learn about, where it's Miranda versus Arizona, or Gideon versus Florida, right? All of these different things that you'll learn about when we get to the judicial unit, or you can look up, are cases in which the attorney general of the state was actually the either defense attorney or prosecuting attorney. So he's the person, I say, defends the state in lawsuits, but also in case of prosecution, if it is the state, he is ultimately responsible for that as well. And then, of course, last but not least, for the other state employees, he is the source of like legal advice. Now, I don't think that means, me technically as a state employee being a public school teacher, that, I can just call up the attorney general and be like, hey, I was just wondering. I don't think that actually happens that way. But for those other top level officials, the elected officials, if the governor's like, hey, am I allowed to do this with an executive order? He can talk to the attorney general, and the attorney general should be the person who knows that answer, right? So qualifications for the attorney general. What do you think? More or less than the last set? Do you think this should be more than the governor? Less than the governor? What do you think? Well, you might be right, because I don't know what you said. But you got to be 30 years old, a licensed attorney, a Missouri resident for a year, and a U.S. citizen. This is very similar to previous things that we've seen, except obviously comparing it to somebody like the Secretary of State, you got to be older, and you have to be a licensed attorney. Now, if you have to be a licensed attorney, you're probably going to be close to 30 anyway. But this means that it's somebody who actually has legal experience, right? You don't want me running to be the attorney general of the state having never, been in a courtroom in any capacity, right? You want somebody who's been in there actually representing or defending someone, right? Once again, as I said on the last one, 4-year term, no term limits. As long as we keep voting him in, he will remain the attorney general. And he makes more money than the last guy. The Secretary of State didn't make as much. The attorney general makes over $100,000. Probably because as an attorney, you make way more money. In fact, you make way more money than $100,000 a year. So they have to actually pay a little bit better, or nobody's ever going to want to run to be attorney general and take a pay cut. Although this probably is still a pay cut for a lot of attorney generals. Treasurer, up next. So the treasurer for the state of Missouri is a guy by the name of Scott Fitzpatrick. What's up? Hopefully I'm not on your face right now. I'm up in the corner here, but I don't think I'm on your face. Anyway, the treasurer has the responsibility of taking care of the funds for Missouri. So the technical term for that is he is our chief financial officer. So very literally, we have billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars that is the state of Missouri, that we spend every year, that we take in taxes every year, and that we have saved up in our state, I don't know what they call it, state fund. But basically that we have like invested in stocks and things like that to continue to save for our state, because unlike some states, we're not in gigantic pools of debt, Illinois. But as part of his job, he gets to be the one that literally signs state government workers' checks. So if you work for the state government at a high enough capacity, then literally his signature is on your check, because he writes all the checks, sort of. I highly doubt that he by hand signs all of the thousands of things. It's probably printed, but you get the idea. So any check coming from the state government itself to pay somebody It's his check, right? So if you had to think about this, I mean, there's his job. That's his whole job, taking care of all the cash for Missouri. If you had to come up with the requirements for this, what might you come up with? I'm giving you time. I want you to think. I'm going to say a degree in finance at minimum, maybe 10 years experience working with large banks, right? There's a lot of things that I would probably put as requirements for being the state treasurer. The requirements that the state of Missouri puts for state treasurer: be alive. About it. You have to be a citizen and have lived in Missouri for a year. That's it. That's everything. They handle all our money. Woo! Now we could change this via law, but for right now, that's it. You can look at the histories of those who have served in this position. From my research this past election, the only person who had a finance-related degree out of all of the candidates for treasurer was the Libertarian candidate. All other people who were running basically had some type of political science or law degree, which isn't bad, but money, you know. So this, once again, 4 years, no term limit. He can continue to serve as our treasurer as long as we want Scott Fitzpatrick as our treasurer and as long as he's alive. So, like, as long as we keep boning him in. Now, once again, gets paid a lot more to be in this position. So paid more than either the governor or lieutenant governor or secretary of state. Makes good money to be the treasurer. Next up, making sure that he's doing his job, the auditor. So the auditor has the job of making sure that everybody else is doing their job financially soundly. So this auditor right here, once again, whose face hopefully I'm not covering, is Nicole Galloway. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because Nicole Galloway just ran for governor and lost. So now, as the auditor, she's going to have to work with Governor Parsons for her term comes up in 2 years. And so for at least 2 years, the two people who you've seen in all those commercials insulting each other and telling you why the other one is horrible are now going to be working together. Politics are fun. Her job is basically to make sure that the money coming in and the money going out from state agencies actually match their budgets, right? So that we don't have a situation where, let's say that the treasurer all of a sudden buys a $5 million home and a just about tipped over my chair. And a new yacht and buys a plane and all this, and he's doing it just writing government checks, right? It's the auditor's job to catch that kind of sketchy behavior. And in order to have that job, she has to have the exact same qualifications as the governor. So just to review, in case you forgot already the qualifications for a governor, that means she's got to be 30 years old, a U.S. citizen for 10 years, and a resident of Missouri for 10 years. That's all of it, right? Now, as auditor, she is kind of supposed to be the third party looking in at everybody and making sure that things are fair, right? it's interesting in Missouri because this is the one position that we consistently elect a Democrat to. So she's a Democrat. She's been elected a couple times now to fill this position. And all of the other elected officials in Missouri, well, in the executive branch of the list that we're going through today, are all Republicans. And something seems kind of fair about having the person who's acting as the watchdog, like we talked about way back when, being from the opposition party, right? It kind of makes sense. So now, 4-year term, no term limits. Wait a minute. I told you wrong. It's wrong in my notes. The treasurer has a term limit. I apologize. Go back and erase that and change that in your notes. The treasurer has a term limit. Fix it. I didn't. I'm sorry. He gets 2 terms. 2 terms. My bad. My brain glitched somewhere in there, but go back and fix that. I'm sorry. I'm not re-recording this whole thing for that. Anyway, the auditor, however, has no term limits, and her pay is about the same as the treasurer. So there you go. That is all of the elected officials in the executive branch. There are probably a lot of things that you could do as far as, projects are concerned with these notes. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me if across any of the 6 positions, you think any of them should have higher or lower requirements. Also, if you have any questions, include them. And if not, if you don't want higher or lower requirements, why? Why do you think that these requirements are good enough? Minimum of 100 words. None of this 2-word answer nonsense. Minimum of 100 words. Tell me, do you believe that these, or if these requirements are good enough across the board, or do you think some of them should be adjusted, higher, lower, added things, for like the treasurer that I complained about, right? Do you think that there should be other requirements? By the way, if you say no for the treasurer, I'm not going to take off points, right? If you want to keep it as it is, you can tell me why. Hopefully I've explained that question thoroughly, but I'm going to state it one more time because the last few times I've had students email me and ask me what the question really means. For all of the elected positions in the executive branch, I want you to go back, look at the qualifications that you have written down in your notes, and tell me, do you believe any of them should be changed for the more difficult or less difficult to attain, and why? All right. Tomorrow we will talk boards and commissions. And I won't get into it now, but I'll tell you then. And I think that's it. I already missed my bullseye. So we're done.